Well, hello again. Dr. Welgan again, psychologist, psychophysiologist, and director of the Center for Behavioral Medicine and the Research Foundation for the Advancement of Behavioral Medicine. Today, we are going to be moving to step 3 in my discussion of obesity. And in this step, we're going to be talking about some of the research that I have recently conducted with a colleague of mine, a medical colleague, to demonstrate something very interesting here, and that is how we can actually begin to modify our behavior, our habit patterns, in such a way that we can produce extremely interesting, significant results in weight loss. I want to talk to you about that in just a moment. You kind of see I put something on the board here that I'm going to get to in just a moment. That is a fundamental structure of the study that I conducted. Okay. First, however, I want to go back to yesterday's lecture. If you remember, I was discussing with you the possible psychological uniqueness of individuals who are obese compared to everybody else, okay? And I indicated to you that the results that I have investigated and surveyed have tended to support my conclusion that there is very little evidence for any major psychological disturbance in this patient population, individuals who are obese. I'd like to show you here, if you'd like to come a little closer to the head of the classroom, if you will, I'd like to have you read something that may well support what I have just said, okay? If you come closer, I'd like you to take a look at this. I'm going to back up a little bit so everybody can see it. And hold it there for a moment. Okay? Are you... I don't expect you to read everything. But what you have here is a list of studies that suggests something that I've been trying to make a point about. If I may read this for you, okay? Is obesity the result of psychiatric or psychological problems? It's a comparison of MMPI test scores, as I discussed with you yesterday, between obese patients and those who are not obese, normal if you want to. Right at the top of the list, as I mentioned to you, my evidence indicates, my studies indicate that there's no difference between obese patients and normals with regard to psychiatric profiles, okay, across those 10 scales that I showed you yesterday. There's an investigator here who is studying obesity, largely because they're trying to determine whether or not they are candidates for bariatric surgery. Okay, Maddie, who tested obese patients in the outcome prediction of gastric bypass surgery, Maddie wanted to check to see whether or not candidates for bypass surgery had any psychiatric problems before surgery, because surgery, as you may know, can be kind of dangerous. What are the results? Maddie found no difference between normals and obese patients on the MMPI. There was some elevation, as I mentioned to you yesterday, with regard to depression. I remember hysteria, that denial indicator, and hypochondriasis, that preoccupation with my own physical health on obese patients. With regard to obese patients, which I mentioned, why shouldn't they be a little depressed, denying the fact that I've got a real problem, can't do too much about, and I'm worried about my health? Okay. They noticed, Maddie also noticed, along with his team members, that after weight loss, there was a reduction in depression, hysteria, and hypochondriasis. Ooh, you mean it really wasn't long-term significant psychiatric problems all along that had nothing to do with losing or gaining weight? Probably had a lot to do, those changes had a lot to do with just feeling better with the weight off, okay? There's a decrease in depression, a decrease in hysteria, a decrease in hypochondriasis due to being obese, and the relief of not being obese. Yeah. Another investigator, Johnson, and his colleagues tested the personality characteristics of this population, and once again, no single personality characteristic associated with obesity. There were several personality profiles among that obese group. Does that surprise you? There's personality profiles all over the place among the normal population. By the way, the same kind of characteristic pattern exists among obese patients. Okay. I told you that I went beyond the MMPI and I took a look at coping mechanisms, right? Well, as I scribbled on the board yesterday, the results of that, we may want to take a look at that in just a little clearer fashion, okay? Remember all those coping styles I discussed with you yesterday? Take a look at that. Coping styles, personality attributes, psychosomatic tendencies, no significant difference. Okay. Okay. These people are kind of normal. All right. Let's move on to what else can be going on here. Well, it's something that, I come out of learning theory laboratories. As I told you before, I'm a rat runner. What do you learn running rats? How we learn. How we develop habit patterns. How we maintain them. And how we extinguish habit patterns. Let's take a look at that, because I think we are looking at a very important variable here that is missed by the professionals who are actually offering weight management programs. And in my opinion, okay, one of the reasons I say that is because we get such really very poor results generally from weight loss programs. You just take a look at the literature to support that opinion. 97% of those who enter weight management programs, weight loss programs, actually fail. If you want to say, they put it back on again. Okay? All right. We've tried medications. You take a look at the medications available over the last 10, 15, 20 years that have been available for obese patients that are actually sort of appetite suppressants. Okay, appetite suppressants. And we're looking at medications that in some ways come and go. What do I mean by that? Talk to your doctor about this. And he will talk to you about the current medication that is now being used for weight management, okay? Current, okay? Now, if you take a look at the history of medications that have been used to lose weight, you'll notice that they are not available anymore in the formularies. The alleged problems that resulted from taking these medications far outweighed the use of them, the benefits, so they have kind of removed them from the market. Okay? Not that they could not produce weight loss, but down the line, as we began to take a look at these medications, we said, no, let's hold off. Okay. Well, what next? Bariatric surgery? Got to be a little careful about that. Why? Because it seems to be the last resort that the professional community looks at as testimony to the fact that I don't know what else to do. Okay, go ahead and introduce surgical procedures here. Okay, hold on just a moment. We should probably roll back our efforts here and take a look at another method, okay, and one that's worked for me, okay. It's a behavior modification program, one I designed, and one that seems to work, at least based on that study, okay. It's only one. And I'm going to be following up in my foundation with additional studies to test this. But I was so impressed with the effectiveness of this behavior modification program that it is worth following up, okay, in a very serious fashion. Okay. So what is that, and what were the results, okay? Well, what you have here is a basic design of a treatment program that ran actually 16 weeks. I have 14, we need 2 more weeks, okay? 4 months. We had in the program, everybody was obese, okay? And these were obese patients that had been referred by physicians into the program, okay? So they had been managed for quite some time, actually were stable at these weights upon entering the program because of the difficulty keeping weight off. So we were looking at stable weights in these people as they came into the program. So what I was interested in doing was studying the effectiveness of my procedures here against the medication du jour, the one that actually produced loss of weight. It no longer is on the market, but in those days it was the medication of choice. Okay? Why? Because it worked. So as we recruited our subjects, really patients, into the program, I randomly assigned them to one of 2 groups, okay, so that they were equally distributed between my behavior modification group and a group that only took medications, medically managed prescriptions that worked. Okay? These were the groups in the obesity study. Weight loss through conditioning habit patterns. Conditioning habit patterns. We'll come back to that. Over 16 weeks, we have the medication group on hold. All they're doing is taking medications for 16 weeks. Okay? And during this period, the behavior modification group is actually going through this process. Well, what is it? I'm not going to go into great detail about it, because if you're interested in actually learning more about it, maybe even coming over and joining our orientation group, I have a lot to say about it. But remember, it is the conditioning of habit patterns. So about the first 6 weeks, right through here, they are actually doing something at home, a home program that I've worked out for them on a daily basis, okay? What they're doing is actually learning how to produce an effect in the nervous system that shuts down appetite, okay? Then, what we do is to begin to transfer that ability, that strengthened habit, and begin to introduce it into the real world. When you're eating, not at home all the time, but when you're out, eating with your friends, socializing, okay? So that what we're actually doing here is taking something that is well learned. We're beginning to see reductions in weight here already in the first 6 weeks. And then when we begin to apply it in real life situations, we begin to see something really very interesting happening. They're not suppressing their appetite. They have learned how to shut down the physiological mechanism that actually supports the appetite drive. And they do that in the real world. But it has to be done systematically, and quite frankly, one of the reasons why most programs don't work very well is because they don't follow the principles of learning and conditioning and the transfer of learning. I haven't found it. It does not seem to jump out at me in these studies. So anyway, I follow what I've learned in learning theory here, and what we get at the end of 16 weeks is this. By the way, the mean weight, about 350 pounds. The mean weight is about 361. Now those are rough. I have to go back and check the specific weights, but that's just about it. So we're looking at some pretty heavy people, men and women combined, okay? By the way, remember that's the mean. One individual, 410 pounds. I want to mention something to you with regard to him, because he represents everybody else in that group. I got a referral for him to enter my program from another psychologist who knew what I was doing. He'd failed everyone, lost interest, lost motivation. he is typical of everyone in those two groups. They tried literally everything. I don't believe we took one patient in that program that had not tried one diet or another, some exercise, some diet, and one medication after another. These all represented failures in other programs. Okay? They all did. I didn't take anybody in that program that was not morbidly obese and pretty much at their wits' end what to do. Okay? Keep that in mind. 410. Conditioning, transfer of learning. And the way you do it, believe me, I've watched other people try to do it in their studies, and I know it's not working. Okay. At the end of 16 weeks, we go ahead and take a look at weights. Okay, weights. What we're seeing here is a reduction in appetite and also a reduction in the amount of food they consume. They actually get full. Behaviorally, they get full. I've had enough. Okay? And it happens automatically. By the way, it has nothing to do with willpower. Nothing to do with willpower. It is just something that begins to happen, almost unconsciously, okay? As a function of what they're doing here. So, as powerful as these drugs are, I'm thinking, and I'm going up against heavyweight here, okay? If there's an effect here, it certainly can't be any more powerful than medication, because it is well known that there is going to be a significant drop-off over 16 weeks. What happens here is the behavior modification group actually lost more weight than those in the medication group. Really? Yeah. No meds. Habit pattern formations, 16 weeks. Okay. So we have what I would consider to be a very powerful tool here that I'm extending and working toward producing long-term stability and weight loss. But it has to be done in a certain way. Okay. So that's where we're going in the foundation. This is a clinical treatment program here. It's available to adults. And if you take a look at my other website, The Weight Gain, you'll notice that the adult program really has its counterpart for children, okay? So you might want to take a look at that. But we're talking about adults here now, okay? So let's give that some thought. And if you are interested in learning more about the details of that study and actually participating in the treatment program here, we'll be starting new groups here at the center, okay? For those of you who will be completing that program and moving on into the extended study, where you'll be becoming a subject in that study, we have arrangements to transition you into the study, okay? But first, I'd like to have you go through that. Okay? So if you have any questions, you can contact me at my email address. Okay? Once again, that's PETERWELGAN, as in Nancy, PH.D, as in dog, at cox.net. That's the best way to communicate with me. I'd be glad to answer your questions. You can also contact me here at my office in the center at 949-903-3179. If you have further questions about this, what I'm doing, or have an interest in joining us in the clinical treatment program, and then the Research Foundation extended study on obesity. Okay. I'll look forward to your calls. Now, next session, we're going to be moving on to a subject that I've had a long-term interest in. Published in this area, University of California, Irvine, gastroenterology. And it is a condition that afflicts millions of individuals throughout the United States. And it's irritable bowel syndrome. Happens to be something that I have studied rather extensively, and I have a treatment program for patients with that condition. I want to talk to you about this tomorrow. So if you will, for those of you who have an interest in irritable bowel, or actually have it, unfortunately, join me tomorrow, and I'd like to talk to you more about them and what I'm doing in that field. Keep in mind, what we're talking about are subjects here that I have identified for you as of special interest to me as a psychophysiologist. Okay? Good. I'll see you tomorrow.